We're going to journey back, way back, over 2,000 years, to meet a thinker who saw something hidden in plain sight. A man who, seriously, with just the power of his mind, looked at our entire world and didn't see things. He saw the secret code, the invisible building blocks that make up everything.
But let's start with a question for you. What if the sweetness of an apple, the color blue, the feeling of warmth, what if none of that is actually real? What if it's all just your brain's interpretation of something much, much simpler? That idea, as wild as it sounds, is exactly where our story with Democritus kicks off.
This quote, it tells you everything you need to know about the guy. Think about it. At a time when being a king meant having ultimate power, Democritus was on a totally different mission. He wasn't after a kingdom. He was hunting for one single, powerful explanation for everything. Just one cause, one truth.
So, who was this thinker? Well, you can forget the image of some stuffy philosopher locked away in a dusty room. Democritus was famously known as the Laughing Traveler, and his whole adventure starts not at Athens, the center of the universe, but in a bustling port city called Abdera.
You know, there was a huge disconnect here between perception and reality. The Athenians, kind of like big city snobs everywhere, they used to mock the people from Abdera, calling them simple-minded country folk. But guess what? This supposed backwater ended up producing two of the greatest minds of the ancient world. It just goes to show, genius can pop up anywhere.
Democritus pretty much won the lottery at birth. He was born into an insanely rich family. So rich, legend has it, they once hosted the entire Persian army for dinner. When his dad died, he inherited a massive fortune. But instead of kicking back and living a life of luxury, he did something absolutely radical. He spent every last bit of it traveling the world to learn. And that detachment from money and power is probably why they called him the laughing philosopher. He was always laughing at the absurd things people chased after.
But listen, this was not some kind of ancient gap year. His journey had one single driving purpose. He wasn't collecting souvenirs. He was on the hunt for that one fundamental explanation for absolutely everything.
And the scale of his quest was just staggering. He became a true global student. He went to Egypt to master geometry, to Babylon to study the stars, and maybe even went as far as Ethiopia and India. He was basically downloading the collective knowledge of the entire ancient world, all to piece together the clues to one great puzzle.
And after all that searching, he found it. He actually did it. He cracked the code. He came up with a theory so elegant, so powerful, and so ridiculously ahead of its time that it would get buried for almost 2,000 years before becoming the bedrock of modern science.
He proposed this really cool thought experiment. Let's say you take an apple, and you cut it in half. Then you cut that half in half again, and again, and again. His point was you can't do that forever. Eventually, you've got to hit something so tiny it literally cannot be cut any further. He called this an atomos, which is just Greek for uncuttable. These tiny things, he said, are the eternal, unchanging building blocks of all reality. But here's the kicker. The atoms weren't enough. For them to move around, to combine, and to create stuff, there had to be something else. Nothing. Empty space. He called it the void. And you have to understand, this was an insane idea at the time. Other philosophers said nothing can't exist by definition. But Democritus realized that empty space was absolutely essential. Without the void, the universe would just be one solid frozen block.
And the genius of his system is just how simple it is. Everything in the cosmos, you, me, a star, a rock, it's all made of the exact same basic stuff. The incredible variety we see is just down to three things: the shape of the atoms, how they're arranged, and their position in space. It's like cosmic Legos, right? The same basic bricks can build anything you can imagine.
Okay, now this is where things get really mind-bending. Because if reality is just atoms moving around in a void, what does that mean for our experience of the world? For everything we see and feel?
This quote right here is maybe his most profound insight. He argued that qualities like sweet or bitter don't actually exist out in the world. They aren't real properties of the atoms themselves. No, they're just sensations created in us when atoms of a certain shape hit the atoms of our tongue. In reality, there are only atoms and empty space. That's it.
So this led him to split all knowledge into two types. First, there's what he, and I'm not kidding, called bastard knowledge. That's all the info we get from our five senses. It's useful for getting around, sure, but it's subjective, it's not the real deal.
True, legitimate knowledge, he said, could only be understood by the mind, through logic, by understanding the fundamental reality of atoms and the void.
Okay, so if the universe is just a godless, random dance of atoms, and we can't even trust our own senses, how on earth are we supposed to live a good life? Well, don't worry, Democritus had an answer for that too. First, he applied his own theory to us. He argued that even our soul isn't some magical, immortal spirit. It's just made of really fine, smooth, round little fire atoms that allow us to think and move. And when you die, there's no heaven, no hell, no afterlife. Those soul atoms, they just scatter. They break apart and go on to become part of something else.
And because there's no afterlife, the whole point of living has to be found right here, right now. He called this goal euthymia, which we can translate as cheerfulness. But he didn't mean chasing parties and excitement. He meant a deep, stable kind of contentment that comes from moderation, from understanding how the universe really works, and from not getting all worked up about things that are, in the end, just the clashing of atoms.
Now, for centuries, Democritus was pretty much ignored. His whole materialist view just didn't jive with the major philosophies and religions that came after him. But his ideas? They were just too powerful to stay buried forever. And in so many ways, he's the perfect philosopher for our modern digital age.
After nearly 2 millennia in the dark, his ideas just exploded back onto the scene. In the 1800s, a scientist named John Dalton was developing modern chemistry, and he needed a theory for matter. So where did he turn? He explicitly revived the old Greek idea of the atom, basically making Democritus the intellectual grandfather of all modern science.
But the connection gets even deeper, and it's an incredible analogy for our time. Democritus said reality is built from two things: something, the atom, and nothing, the void. Well, what is our entire digital world built on? The exact same principle. A closed circuit, a 1, and an open circuit, a 0. Everything you're seeing right now is just an unbelievably complex arrangement of those two digital atoms.
His way of thinking is startlingly relevant to today's world. I mean, think about artificial intelligence. Democritus would have had zero problem with it. If a human mind is just a complex pattern of carbon-based atoms, then why couldn't a machine mind be a complex pattern of silicon-based ones? For Democritus, there's no magic spark. There's only matter and how it's arranged.
And that leaves us with a truly modern question that comes from an ancient mind. If Democritus is right, and if consciousness is just a pattern, just organized matter, then what is the fundamental difference between a soul made of fire atoms and one made of silicon? It's a thought that challenges our most basic ideas of what it even means to be alive.